Susan Ungaro. My mother was married to Charles Mingus. They met when I was 8 years old, and it was a very interesting experience having Charles Mingus as in my family, in my life. He had a very big personality. He was a bigger than life personality. Everything that he did in a big way. It wasn't small, it was big, and that's what I remember of Charles Mingus, that he gave me a different perspective on life, that life could be as big as you wanted to make it. And I was born in Italy. My father was a painter and a sculptor in Rome, and I was born there, and then went to the United States, and my father died when I was young, and my mother met Charles Mingus.
Okay, so you met Charles Mingus when you were 8 years old. What is the first thing you remember about Charles?
Well, I was practicing learning the piano, and the first thing I remember was that he told me that in Japan, piano players cut the skin in between their little finger and their ring finger so that they can have a bigger spread on the piano. And I was 8 years old, and I thought, maybe I don't want to play the piano. But so he always had these wild stories, and he was an interesting man, and I feel really lucky that I knew him.
So one of the albums Charles Mingus did was Let My Children Hear Music. What kind of music did you listen with him?
Well, growing up, we only listened to Charles Mingus at home. We didn't listen to Miles Davis or Dizzy Gillespie or Sonny Rollins. Those people would come to visit us at home, but we didn't listen to their music. So when I only heard Charles Mingus, and even when I was younger, I didn't like jazz. It was until I was in my 20s that I actually heard jazz for the first time. I thought it was noise. I heard Miles Davis when I was 12 years old, and I went to this club with my mother and Charles, and Miles Davis played 3 notes on the trumpet, and then he was sweating, and he walked it backstage, and I thought, I'm 12 years old, and I'm thinking, this is music? And so Miles was a completely different musician than Charles Mingus. But then I went to hear Charles when I was also 12 at the Village Vanguard, and all the musicians were playing their instruments at the same time, just blowing. And this was strange to me because, it just goes to show that in life, it's whatever you make it. You can create your own style, and this is what the lessons that I learned, that you can create your own style in life. It doesn't have to be what you think it's supposed to be, and that's what he taught me. So, and what kind of music? When I listen to Charles Mingus, like Sue's Changes. Sue is my mother. And it's a song that starts slowly, and then it gets very fast, and then it slows down, and all the tempos, and that's the difference with Charles Mingus's music, is the tempos, the time changes. I was also married to a musician, a saxophone player. His name is Alex Foster, and he played with Jack DeJohnette, and he's also in the Saturday Night Live band in New York, and he's the musical director now for 3 of the 7 Mingus bands that my mother has 7 bands that play Charles Mingus's music. One is 31 pieces, 31 instruments. So, and that's an orchestration of music that was never performed in Charles Mingus's lifetime, and it was named Epitaph because he knew it wouldn't be performed till after his death. So. And I'm very involved with the Charles Mingus estate, and I work for my mother. I put Charles Mingus on a United States postal stamp, in 1995, and they made the stamps available at the Montreux Jazz Festival. So.
Wow. Could you also talk about the relationship between Charles Mingus and politics?
Well, what Charles did, and I think any artist, was that he used his medium, which was music, to talk about the things that he thought were wrong in the world. And he would write songs to expose the bad things that different politicians did when there was when there were problems with race, with black and whites, and Fables of Faubus is a tune that was played for the governor of Arkansas, who didn't want integration of black and whites in the 60s. And so he had so much passion and fire for life, and he had anger. He wasn't black and he wasn't white, and he wasn't accepted in his own community. And he wrote a book called Beneath the Underdog, which was about the fact that he wasn't accepted, and how it was hard. But I think it made him a stronger person, and he just was a very special human being. Suona piano, singing. I took vocal, guitar. Mingus gave me a guitar, and I took guitar lessons. But when you have Charles Mingus for a stepfather, you can't become a musician. It's like his own children. His one son plays the bass, and also I think trombone. But when you're the child of someone who's very famous, it's hard to really, you're in the shadow of their personality. It's hard to, you just have to live your life. And, for me, music, I love music. I used to play Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, and I would blast rock and roll, and I was always wondering if I had an influence on Charles Mingus's music, but I don't think so.
So, have you ever taken part of a rehearsal of Charles Mingus band?
Well, since Charles and my mother met when I was 8 years old, the first time my mother gave me a job when I was 9 years old, cleaning Charles Mingus's apartment. It was very interesting. But all my life, I was involved in helping my mother, doing everything in the office. I was her assistant, and I would go to concerts. And one time, Charles was playing at Lincoln Center, and I didn't know how I didn't have a ticket, and Charles gave me the bow for his bass, and he said, go to the backstage entrance and tell them that you're bringing me my bow. And so I got into the backstage of Lincoln Center where he was performing, and when I was little, I would be under the table in the clubs, and I would hear, of course, going to the rehearsals and the performances, and I traveled to, when I was 16, I got into trouble, and I had to go on tour for 2 weeks to Nice and to Ronnie Scott's in London with Charles, with my mother, because they didn't want to leave me in New York alone. So I was always, we were a family. Charles, musicians don't make the best husbands or fathers. They sleep all day and they play at night. And my mother actually wrote a book called Tonight at Noon, which is a tune that Mingus wrote, because noon, which is midday, is midnight for a musician, because they wake up at 6 o'clock and then midnight is like lunchtime, there. So Tonight at Noon, so musicians aren't always at home.
Yeah.
in when children are growing up, but we were a family and we traveled together and did things, and he would play the edge of a table when we went away to keep the calluses on his hands.
Wow.
So, you know, it was fun.
And when you were on tour, when Mingus had the time to write new song or something?
He was always writing, and he would compose on the piano at night. One of my favorite CDs of Mingus is Mingus on Piano. It's a beautiful album where he's just playing Olive, and he even speaks a little bit. And but he would write at night, you know, when I was trying to sleep. And I remember one night he was saying to my mother, what should I call, you know, what's the name for this tune? And from my bedroom I yelled, Early in the Morning, because, you know, I would have to be trying to sleep to go to school the next day. And, but, you know, he would come home with 10 pounds of scampi, you know, 10 pounds of, you know, big, you know, he loved to eat. And, so it gave me love for a lot of different things, for life and food, and you know, I have lots of stories.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. Era mio piacere. Buona fortuna al Jazz Festival di Torino. È mio piacere di essere qui in Torino per questo festivale. Grazie.